Alright, guys, even as the dust of yesterday's documentary comes settling down, Kenyans got a lot of questions regard of what happened, and it's unfortunate. It was an embarrassing scene. It's a sad scene, so to speak, and that's the reality. But we cannot afford to ignore one chap that stood out yesterday in that particular documentary, and that's Allan Ademba. Let's give him his flowers. Before I proceed and find out who is Allan Ademba, let's first watch this particular information, this particular presser from the Vocal Africa. Just
Kenyans
watch.
have today woken up to the truth behind what truly transpired on 25th of June 2024. BBC Africa has given us a detailed step-by-step account of how the Gen Z protesters were brutally murdered by the same individual officers who were meant to protect their lives. Erickson Mutisia, David Chege, Eric Shieni were all killed outside Parliament on that fateful day. The BBC has unmasked who was behind these killings. Now, there should be no doubt as to who is responsible for the loss of their lives. On June 26th, the day after, Vocal Africa, together with family and friends of the deceased, were at the city mortuary to document in the quest for justice. We were present during the autopsy, records of which we have to date. And the time has now come for us to demand that justice be delivered. All the evidence to ensure justice is done is now available. We have witnesses, we have the autopsy reports, and thanks to BBC, we now know who the killers were. President Ruto, the evidence is overwhelming. As the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and as the head of the executive in which the Ministry of Interior lies, you have every power to ensure the perpetrators are held to account. The time for justice is now. We Kenyans are watching you.
Well, that's a statement from the Vocal Africa issuing their demands to the government regarding yesterday documentary that was aired with the BBC, The Blood Parliament, and they're demanding action should be taken to those officers that are mentioned in that particular documentary. But one chap stood out in all this, and this is Allan Ademba. In yesterday's interview, Allan, a little known chap, stood out. We've not, I didn't know Allan until yesterday, but after the documentary, watching that particular documentary, kudos to Allan. Let's give him his flowers. He did a great job. He stood with the Kenyans who were injured, others were shot at the very doorstep of the parliament, and he helped them out. Allan, we celebrate you. You are a great chap. You are a truly Kenyan, because personally, if I work Allan after the first shot, after the first bullet shot, perhaps I would run away. I would be on my heels, but Allan stood with the Kenyans, and he helped those Gen Zs that were injured at the doorstep of the parliament. We celebrate you, chap. Indeed, you are a hero. And even as the aftermath of that particular documentary start sinking into the minds of Kenyans, a lot of questions are flying around in the minds of Kenyans. Kenyans are saying that heads must roll, and people should be brought to book, especially those that have been mentioned in that particular documentary. Kenyans are demanding answers why it happened, or why it had to happen that way. And they are saying that heads must roll, and people should be brought to book to answer charges of that particular what have been aired into that particular documentary. The reality of yesterday's documentary starts sinking into the minds of Kenyans. It has received praises as the same as opposition from the government to speak. Among the legislators that decided to critique that particular documentary is Peter Kaluma. In his Twitter handle, Peter Kaluma said this: Bloody Parliament documentary by BBC is twisted, partial, reckless, and intended to incite chaos in Kenyans. in Kenya, so to speak. The relevant agencies of the government of Kenya must act fast to withdraw BBC license in Kenya. Peter Kaluma is demanding that BBC license should be withdrawn in Kenya because of that particular documentary. But there are those that are in support of the documentary, and one of them is Edwin Sifuna. Edwin Sifuna wrote this on his X or Twitter handle. He said, the story of June 25th, 2024 is already written, and as they say, the ink is dry. Those attempting to rewrite it will find it especially difficult because this particular piece of history is written in blood. Speaking as someone who was present in Parliament that day, the events depicted in the Blood Parliament documentary by BBC Africa Eye are not fabrication. They happened. We all saw it live and on our screens. We must encourage these stories to be told from all angles for the sake of truth and justice. Those who are uncomfortable with this are wrestling with their own conscience, and we cannot help them with that. That is Edwin Sifuna speaking on regarding the yesterday's documentary about Blood Parliament by BBC, and he is support of that. He's saying that we should not live in denial. That's what happened. BBC depicted, or whatever is depicted in that particular documentary, is exactly what happened at the Parliament. So he's saying there is no problem with what BBC did. BBC is just exposing the wound of what happened in that particular Parliament. Remember, yesterday, some of mainstream media were cancelled, or who are meant to air that particular documentary. It was cancelled. Among them, it's NTV. NTV on their website said that they've been cancelled based on pressure from above or pressure from authority, and they had to cancel the screening of or the showing of that particular documentary because let's say the government was a bit uncomfortable with it, and they decided to pressure, so to speak, the mainstream media not to show it. That tells you the weight of that documentary, because it is still ringing in the minds of Kenyans, and it is a discussion perhaps that will carry on the whole of this week, so to speak, because Kenyans are discussing about it, and they just delving into every angle, every detail that was aired on with the BBC Eye on Africa. If it is your first time on my channel, guys, could you kindly just spare a moment of your time and hit that subscription button before you sign out? Put on a notification bell as well, so that when I do subsequent videos, you'll not miss out. Adios. Ciao, ciao.